Hello everyone, after the awesomeness of Deadpool and Wolverine and creating a solid Deadpool trilogy, it got me thinking about my top 10 favorite comic book movie trilogies. Now before I continue with my personal list, feel free to share down in the comments below your favorite comic book movie trilogies. Starting as an honorable mention would be the East Rail 177 trilogy with Unbreakable, Split, and Glass. It's technically not based on a comic book, but other than that, it's a pretty solid trilogy despite the third one having some flaws. Unbreakable and Split are classics on their own, and overall, it's a great trilogy regarding a hero, supervillain, and villain. And number 10 would be the Sam Raimi Spider-Man Trilogy. This is the beginning of Marvel, post-Blade, post-X-Men. Spider-Man kicked it out of the gate, stayed true to the 60s comics. You could tell there was a lot of love and passion that Sam Raimi was a true Spider-Man fan. Tobey Maguire is perfect as Peter Parker. He made the film. You have William Dafoe's Green Goblin, Alfred Molina Doc Ock, and then you get Thomas Hayden Church as Sandman and Topher Grace as Venom. While Venom wasn't the best, I do like the story with the black suit. I do like seeing the new Goblin played by James Franco, Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane, and that whole trilogy arc. And because of the third film, that's why this trilogy is not higher on the list. The first two are classics. The third one really fumbled things in a big way, but I'm glad that Tobey Maguire had a bit of an ending in Spider-Man No Way Home. After that is the Iron Man Trilogy. This would be Iron Man 2, and Iron Man 3, the film that kickstarted the MCU. I mean, I can't imagine anybody other than Robert Downey Jr. playing Tony Stark. Jon Favreau owes a lot of thanks for not only kickstarting the MCU, but allowing the Avengers to be a possibility. I loved seeing Obadiah Stane played by Jeff Bridges. I love seeing Justin Hammer played by Sam Rockwell, Whiplash played by Mickey Rourke. And then you get Fake Mandarin with Ben Kingsley, and yeah, the third film I think is more entertaining than Iron Man 2, but because of that whole Mandarin twist, it just really ruined what was pretty much a good film up until that point. I think they leaned more into the comedy, and that hurt this trilogy. And the second one wasn't as good as the first, but it still felt in line with the tone. And then don't get me started with the Rhodey recasting. But other than that, though, this is a pretty solid trilogy. For comic books, you actually had the same actor more than 2 times. And I wish we had Jon Favreau direct, because I would have loved to see the actual Mandarin, but luckily Shang-Chi corrected that and even made fun of Trevor, made him a court jester, which I thought was funny. Overall, this has a lot of action and a lot of heart that's missing from the current superhero films. Speaking of heart, next up is the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy. While this deviates from the source material, I have to say James Gunn brought a lot of heart to the series, made people care about these characters that not many people knew about. Chris Pratt is perfect as Star-Lord, and while they did kind of make him more of an idiot in the beginning, I do like how he was in part 3. He was closer to the comics as somebody who, like, yeah, he does stupid stuff sometimes, but he wears his heart in his sleeve, and you know why the crew stays with him, you know? There's this Han Solo element there. And even though they changed his father, I do like Kurt Russell and that whole story of ego in part 2. The first one I think is probably the strongest as far as like these band of misfits getting together. You see stuff like Suicide Squad, you see stuff like Borderlands, and you can see the style that was derived from this film. It also allowed the Marvel Universe to go cosmic. And then, like I said, with Ego, and then part 3 is probably like the darkest one of all, with Rocket Raccoon's past, who have Bradley Cooper, Zoe Saldana as Gamora, Dave Bautista as Drax. Drax, they dumbed down a bit from the comics, but despite that, though, this is a pretty solid trilogy. After that would be the Blade trilogy. Blade started it all. Without Blade or Men in Black, you would never have X-Men, Spider-Man. You may not even have the MCU. This kickstarted it in big fashion, rated R. Wesley Snipes is perfect as Eric. And then who could forget Chris Christopherson as Whistler. The second one, even better, directed by Guillermo del Toro. And David S. Goyer goes from screenwriter to director in Trinity. And while it's not the best, it still is an entertaining film. And I like it. This is a solid trilogy. I wish we had one more that it ended a bit stronger. But it was fun seeing Ryan Reynolds and then Jessica Biel there. Him fighting Dracula, total throwback to Tomb of Dracula. Overall, this trilogy showed you that some other efforts are always trying to ice skate uphill. After that would be the Tom Holland Spider-Man Trilogy. Now, I personally like the other films more, but as a trilogy, this is a nice origin tale. You know, at the beginning, it's pretty much Iron Boy, Iron Man Jr., And I don't like that. It's kind of very John Hughes-like, Disney Channel-like. But there's a certain charm to it. The first one with Vulture, played by Michael Keaton, getting in the whole MCU post-Civil War. And then you have Far From Home, which really kicks things off in a big way with Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio. I love this. The only thing that I think knocks it down a bit is a whole revelation of the Skrulls and like Nick Fury's involvement. But other than that, it builds upon the first one, and then No Way Home is what really drives it all together and sticks the landing for this trilogy, bringing back not only 2 previous Spider-Mans, but all the villains. And William Dafoe is better than ever. Tom Holland's Peter Parker loses Aunt May, and you realize that all 3 of these films is practically the origin of the MCU Spider-Man. And he ends as a Spider-Man we all know and love from the comics. After that would be the Deadpool Trilogy. Yeah, Ryan Reynolds brought this character to life, after the leaks. After they sewed his mouth shut in X-Men Origins Wolverine, we get the definitive Deadpool film. And then Deadpool 2 suffers from sequelitis, but it does a lot of great stuff that's known from the comics. You get Juggernaut, you get Cable, Domino, Zazie Beetz as Domino, and then Deadpool and Wolverine really throws a multiverse of madness into the void and brings us a duo that we've been waiting to see forever. And we finally get to see Wolverine in the iconic yellow suit. Overall, I think the first one's the best one. I enjoy 1 and 3 more than 2, but it's a solid, consistent trilogy. And what more can you ask for from a comic book superhero trilogy, let alone one that's in comedy? This is one where the comedy actually works because it's meant to be a comedy. It's meant to break the fourth wall. It's meant to be meta. They don't dumb it down. They give people what they want while also having fun and giving people their moments. After that, at number 4 is the Wolverine Trilogy, and that's counting X-Men Origins Wolverine, The Wolverine, and Logan. X-Men Origins actually wouldn't have been bad if it was rated R or if it stayed more in line with X2. And then they had a lot of mutants, but I love the love story with Wolverine and Silver Fox. I love the backstory with him and Sabretooth. And overall, yeah, they sew Deadpool's mouth shut, but you still get that cool opening sequence. And then the Wolverine adapts the Silver Samurai story with some embellishments and brings us into Japan, and that leaves the door open for one of the greatest comic book movies ever made, Logan. Seriously, this is my favorite X-Men movie. I love them adapting the Old Man Logan storyline and grounded it into this dystopian future. And it's a heartfelt story, seeing Daphne Keane as Laura, aka X-23. Patrick Stewart gives a great performance as Professor Xavier, and Hugh Jackman goes out in big fashion before his epilogue in Deadpool and Wolverine. Next up would be the Captain America Trilogy. First Avenger, I loved. It stayed true to the early comics of Marvel. The only thing that felt rushed was how he woke up and how fine he was waking up 70 years later after being frozen. It felt rushed to go into the Avengers. But everything else about that movie is probably one of my favorite superhero origin stories with Iron Man 1 and X-Men First Class. Seriously. And then Winter Soldier is where the Russo brothers come in, and this is probably one of the best Marvel movies ever made. I love this with the whole Bucky Winter Soldier plotline, Hydra infiltrating S.H.I.E.L.D., and then Robert Redford. An actor like him isn't going to be there for nothing. He's going to play somebody, and he did, and that was such a great movie that springboarded onto an adaptation of Civil War with Captain America Civil War, Iron Man, and Captain America fighting. That whole revelation with Bucky killing Iron Man's parents, just great. After that would be Zack Snyder's Justice League trilogy. Now, even though this is part of the overall DCEU, his trilogy consists of Man of Steel, BVS, and Justice League Snyder Cut. Oh man, I love this trilogy with Henry Cavill as his 21st century Superman and Man of Steel, the cast, seeing Batman and Wonder Woman join the world in BVS, and seeing what would the world act like if a Superman actually existed in our 21st century. How would they treat him? I love seeing that, but also him accepting Earth as his home and rising up to be the hero. They may stumble, they may fall, but they'll all join him in the sun in the end, and that's what we see in Zack Snyder's Justice League, an epic, probably the most quintessential DC Comics film ever made as far as bringing the essence of the comics and putting it into live action, and it is just a modern epic. I love this trilogy. You know what? I'm thankful for what we have. Seeing Superman, seeing him deal with the world of DC heroes, seeing him die and come back in the black suit, seeing Darkseid. There's so much in this trilogy. The Martian Manhunter, there's some stuff that didn't get fully realized or paid off, but there is a lot that happened in these 3 films, more than any other comic book film for Superman in the past 2 decades. So, yeah, I'm just thankful for the existence of these films and that it was made by a filmmaker who actually cared about these characters and treated them as if they were a part of mythology. Going with that, my favorite comic book trilogy is the Dark Knight Trilogy. Seriously, Batman Begins is a film that got it right, finally. And then you get Dark Knight that transcended the genre. It's almost an insult to call it a comic book film. It's the Godfather Part 2 of comic book films, but it's just a great film, period. And then you get Dark Knight Rises, which to me was always a solid conclusion. It's very much like Return of the Jedi, where like, yeah, it's not as strong as the first two, but it's like the most rewatchable and a satisfying conclusion. That's how I feel. I love the homages they give to the comics. Despite being grounded in real life, Christian Bale is great. It's not who I am underneath, but what I do that defines me. Heath Ledger is iconic as a Joker. Cillian Murphy as Scarecrow. You get Liam Neeson in there. You get Tom Hardy as Bane. Marion Cotillard as Talia. Anne Hathaway as Catwoman. I mean, man, this trilogy. And then who could forget Michael Caine as Alfred? All-star cast. You could tell they took a lot of influence from Richard Donner's Superman as far as casting goes. And Christopher Nolan brought us the greatest comic book trilogy. The greatest Batman trilogy by far, definitely brought to screen. And I absolutely love it. Anyway, those are my top 10 favorite comic book movie trilogies. Again, down in the comments below, let me know your favorite comic book movie trilogies. And in the meantime, you can check out these other videos for more content. May everyone stay safe and healthy out there. Till next time.